Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the show Stock Talks with the Business Talk Library. And today we have another great series. We're going to talk about a few updates, things that have happened in the market, things that have happened in the world that impact or may impact your stock strategy. So let's go ahead and jump into today's topics. Now, just to give you a little hint, a couple of things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the Wonder Woman release that came out this past weekend or this past week. We're going to talk about, what's going on in retail sales. We'll also talk about what's going to be the stock of the week, which is a video where I do a deep dive analysis into one stock every single week and give you my input, my thoughts on, hey, would I buy this or not? Or, hey, what I think about this stock. And then we're also going to talk about, a hot topic in stocks, something that a lot of people have been asking questions about. So we're going to cover that as well. So let's jump into the very first topic. Now, the very first topic is one where I'll be honest. This is not a critic review of the movie. Now, I did see the movie Wonder Woman 1984. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't impressed with the movie. I was a little disappointed with the movie. But the thing that I really wanted to focus on was more so releasing a movie, or I guess you say a box office movie during COVID, is an interesting thing because I think about the business of the theaters, the business in the entertainment industry. And when it comes down to that, one of the things that stood out to me, or a couple of things that stood out to me, as you kind of see on the screen, the box office sales in the US only, just for theaters, was 16.7 million. Now, you may say that's not that big of a deal because movies are used to doing, 100 plus million in the first weekend, and which is very, very true. But when you think about in an age of COVID, that is I guess you say that's a remarkable number that catches attention. Because if you think about it, if we do the math, the average ticket for a movie theater may cost about $9 or whatever. And then if you do that math, 16.7 million divided by 9 is somewhere around like 1.8 million people. So 1.8 million people went out to go buy a ticket to see this movie in theaters. Now, we also know that there's a ton of people who saw it when it was released on HBO Max, which those numbers have not been released, so we don't know what the viewership looks like there. But what we do know is that, hey, a significant amount of people still went out to see this in theaters. Now, where Wonder Woman, as a business perspective, has done even better is on the international level, because if you look at worldwide sales, it did 85 million, which means most of the people who went to theaters to see this movie saw it outside of the US. So there is a lot of attention for the movie. And I think that what it brings up for investors is when you think about, the theaters and you think about the entertainment industry, is a lot of people, really wrote off those stocks. With COVID, they said, hey, there's no way they'll be able to pivot. They'll be able to figure it out. But what we do see is that people still have an appetite for seeing movies in theaters, even though we don't have COVID completely figured out. There's still a significant amount of people who are willing to go see it. And what I do think what that tells us is that, as we start to get a handle on COVID and people start to feel a little bit more comfortable, the theater industry may not be as dead as people have previously thought. And then it also opens us up to the greater topic of the streaming versus theater release approach, because we've also saw that with some of the Disney product, or as they say, some of the Disney releases, one in particular being Mulan, where it released on Disney's streaming app and it did not go the traditional route of going through theaters. And then when you think about different companies that are making movies, the question that I ask myself is, if you're going to be in the entertainment industry, it's, do you own the supply chain to be able to have control over how your movies get released? Or do you have to rely on the traditional partnerships of the theaters? And so with that being said, one of the things that I think that people probably should consider are, the companies or the entertainment companies that actually have control over their distribution. Think of your Disney, your Amazon, your Netflix. I mean, those type of streaming, and even Apple, I mean, those type of streaming options allow them to be able to pivot and navigate and still release, get their movies to the people who love and want to see them. So again, the movie Wonder Woman, it released. It was a partial, I guess you say, a partial release in theaters. But what we do look forward is to see, what did the streaming look like? What did that look like when all of the people who are at home able to see it at home? When those numbers come out, it'll be interesting to see, to compare that to how many people showed up in the theaters to see it. Now, I will say, my personal opinion is not a full critique of the movie. I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, but I have come across a lot of people that did like the movie. They said it was good. So if you're interested, I would say check out the movie and, develop your own opinion about what you think about the movie. Now, the next topic I wanted to talk about were retail sales, because data has come out about retail sales in Q4. Now, that was a big concern for a lot of investors, is with everything that's going on with COVID, with the latest stimulus bill at the time, it was hanging in the balance, unsure about whether it would go through or what it would be when it got through. A lot of people were concerned about retail sales. Well, there's a very interesting thing that happened with retail sales. Is actually, it showed a 3% increase, because people were expecting retail sales to be up by maybe 2.4% in Q4, but it actually was up 3%, which means retail sales exceeded expectations, meaning that people had a little bit more confidence about spending money than we expected, which is probably why you've seen some retail-related stocks see a bit of a jump in the markets, because when the reports came out that, hey, people spent a little bit more than we expected. And, a couple of things that really drove the Q4 jump. One of the big ones is Amazon Prime Day. Of course, Amazon Prime Day happening in October. One of the things that you saw is a lot of companies kind of taking that approach of, hey, if we're going to be responsible for not crowding our in-person stores or not trying to wait until the last minute to get all our retail sales in, how do we start to spread it out throughout the quarter? Because you saw a lot of companies that would typically do a huge Black Friday sale. They started actually doing those sales a little bit earlier, prior to Black Friday, to avoid the massive crowd, the massive rush, in facts of being responsible as it relates to COVID and just not waiting to the end of the quarter. But what we did see is that there was a pretty decent jump. And also another thing to keep in mind is a lot of people believe that, because it's, online sales, it was, that really drove it. But in fact, online sales make up maybe about 20%, to be more exact, 19.7% of the retail sales happen via a digital platform or online, which means almost 80% of retail sales are still happening in physical stores. Because I know a lot of people think because Amazon is so big that they're taking over the world. But if you think about it, retail sales, 80% of it is still happening inside physical stores. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. A couple other things to keep in mind as we look at, a little bit more specific at a couple of industries that jumped out to me. The first one was the home improvement. When you look at e-commerce and you look at what percent of home improvement products are being purchased online, is about 79%. Which is up by 14% this year over year compared to the same time last year. And when it comes down to furniture and furnishings, they are at 31% of the furnishings and furniture that is bought online, which is up 16%. You see the trend. A lot more people are spending money in these areas online compared to last year. And then we look at apparel. Now, apparel went the opposite direction when you look at it year over year. Year over year, apparel was down about 19.1%, which, gives you some thought about, if you're holding stocks in the apparel, in the fashion industry, I would give that a closer look consider your strategy, whatever your investment strategy is, consider it, and then ask yourself, hey, is this still right for my portfolio for me to still hold these type of stocks based on the trends and what's going on? Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is a hot topic, because a lot of people are spending a lot of time trying to get into investing, whether that's buying and selling stocks. And sometimes people just don't know exactly how to get involved or what ways to get involved, or they don't know how to even get started. So one of the things I wanted to do is take a second to take a step back and just really understand. I mean, investing, and the way I like to look at it is an old adage where people talked about, playing the money game. I mean, where one of the things I like to tell people is, what are some ways that you can get in the games of investing? And one of the more obvious ways is, the open market investing, where that's where you're buying stocks. You can buy and sell bonds, buy and sell options. All of those are very, very open environments where you can go to most of your retail investors, or I guess you say your online brokers, to get involved there. And there's a ton of, but what I always advise people to do is to do your research. You want to make sure that you're getting an understanding of what you're putting your money in. Because I always tell people, if you don't understand what you're putting your money into, then you're pretty much just gambling, hoping that the great stock lottery favors you or something. And that's not the way that investments work. So you want to make sure you get a better understanding of that before you start putting your money into it. The other aspect that it has really seen an uptick this year, and not a lot of people understand the depths of what a SPAC is. I mean, it's a special purpose acquisition company. And so pretty much one of the ways of getting involved in the game of investing is where there may be a company that is formed solely for the purpose of buying other companies. And so what they do is they put out an offer. They allow other people to invest in this company that has the purpose of buying other companies. Now, at the time when they release the SPAC, they may not necessarily know what company they're going to buy. So there are some limitations on it. Whereas if you put money into a SPAC, within 2 years, that SPAC has to go out and then invest in buying other companies, and then you will become an owner of the company that they invest into. And which is an interesting way. I mean, if you're looking for more sophisticated ways, maybe that's an option of something to look up, because we have seen, even though 2020 has been an interesting year, we have seen a lot more IPOs happening this year. We've seen an increase in SPAC option, or I guess you say SPAC organizations being created this year, because a lot of people are trying to engage in investing in the market and investing in different companies and what's going on. Now, the other aspect of a game, it comes down to the players, and you need to understand who are the players when it comes down to investing. Now, one of the most, I guess you say, probably the players that you're most familiar with are the retail investors. Now, when you think retail investors, think individual investors, people who aren't professionals at it, like people who aren't, their company isn't designed around investing, or they aren't considered what you would call an institutional investor. So most people fall into the retail investor category. And one of the things that you really find in the retail is that they end up leveraging online platforms to trade and to buy and sell stocks. And that's where you really want to start to make sure you understand, like, hey, the tools that you're using, what tools are available. Now, when you think about tools, think about things like, whether it's Robinhood, whether it's E-Trade, whether it's Charles Schwab's, or even if it's working with a actual, let's say a broker at, let's say, your local bank or your branch bank or something like that. Someone that's providing you insight, context on helping you navigate the individual investment decisions that you're making. Now, on the institutional level, which a lot of times when you watch your financial news, a lot of things you're going to hear are from the perspective of the institutional investor. And when you think institutional investor, think large banks, think, the large mutual funds, or think these big investment funds, or even insurance banks or pension funds, different things like that. So when you're hearing information about stocks and you're hearing information about what's going on in the market, you need to understand, are they talking from an institutional perspective or are they talking from a retail investor perspective? Because as you begin to understand how to navigate the two or how to understand the two, you can then start to break down the information to understand what's relevant for you. Because I tell everyone, and that's really what we do on this show, Stock Talk, is really just helping people start to break down the information so that you can pull out the pieces that are relevant for you. Now, the last one I want to talk about is, our stock of the week. Our stock of the week is Zix Corporation. Now, you may have not heard about this company, but I do think it is an interesting one that you should consider because Zix is in the email encryption space, which as we think about it, more and the more we move in the realm of technology, the more encryption and data protection is necessary. And especially when you consider things like trying to make medical treatment and I guess you say the healthcare expanded to an even greater reach and trying to make that more digital where people can get their data or they can get their reports and their information from their doctors no matter where they are. As you start to do that, the level of encryption and protection that is needed for the data will increase, which is why Zix, the industry they're in, is one that is a pretty interesting perspective to me. And at the time when I started looking at this company, it was below, I think it was below $8 a share. And it's still below the $10 a share mark. So it is one that could be a very interesting one to consider. But this Wednesday, I'll be releasing our deep dive into that company. So you can come back to the Facebook page, you can come to the YouTube page to check it out, to where we go in a deep dive and I give each section of the company a grade and I let you know, hey, this is my honest opinion or this is what I think about this stock. And now, as always, if you want to continue getting more great insight about what's going on in stocks, I will also tell you, we do release one free one a week, but we're also doing tons of research on other companies that we're releasing specifically for our community. So if you're interested in joining the Smart Investor community, you can find us on Patreon, and that is patreon.com/Business Talk Library. And there, what you can do is you can get access to more in-depth analysis that we're doing on a lot of different companies so you can understand it a lot more. Because again, if you're going to win in the game of investing, it really starts with educating yourself and becoming more informed before you put your money into something. So that's our weekly wrap up for this week. And as I said, we talked about a couple of things. We talked about the Wonder Woman release, the impact and what that may mean for the theaters and the entertainment sector. We talked about the Q4 retail sales report. We talked about, hey, what's the stock of the week, which is going to be Zix. So come back Wednesday to check that one out. And then we also talked about, some of the fundamentals behind, investing. If you're going to get into investing, some of the things to consider. And then also that framework of how you can understand all these financial data, these tips, these things that people talk about. You want to make sure that you understand it and that you're thinking about it properly. Because if you're not thinking about it properly, you could be putting yourself in a bad position, and I don't want you to do that. So definitely stay tuned to Talk Talks, because we are going to continue providing you insight, background information, and breaking it down so that you understand what is good information and you start to understand, hey, how to navigate the information to make more informed decisions for your investment portfolio.